So you're moving to Georgia. You may have some legal questions that you don't even know about yet. So I'm here with Eric Slepian of Slepian & Swartz. Hi, Eric.
Hi.
Just wanted to talk through some of the things that we encounter with a lot of people relocating to Georgia. So, as I told you earlier, we've lived in other states where they don't have closing attorneys. They have title companies.
Right.
Talk to us about a little bit of the differences, and can they use any attorney?
Sure, great questions. So yes, in a lot of states, most states, title companies handle the closings. And you don't have to be a licensed attorney. In the state of Georgia, the closing of a real estate transaction is considered under law to be the practice of law. So only a Georgia attorney can conduct a real estate closing in Georgia. The main thing that's different about that is a lot of times with title companies, the buyer and seller don't actually see each other at the transaction.
We've had several that are like, this is kind of weird, we're all together at a closing.
Right.
Which is,
They walk in the room and say, wow, I've never met my seller before. You know? Which is good and bad, because a lot of times then the conversation takes over about the house rather than the closing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So can they use any attorney they want to use?
Technically, any attorney licensed to practice law in Georgia can conduct a real estate closing.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. Right. It can be a really bad idea, because if this is not something that you do all of the time, you wouldn't necessarily know what we see in the industry as being pitfalls or fraudulent activity that happens sometimes. We actually had a transaction like that where the seller, his loan was not actually paid off by the attorney because they got fraudulent wire instructions.
Oh, wow.
And now the buyer can't have clear title to the property, the seller still owes the mortgage, and the attorney filed bankruptcy and can't make anybody whole.
Good thing.
No.
So you just brought up something that we have talked about, and I know when you've had seminars at our office, you've highlighted wire fraud.
Wire fraud.
It is very real. It's scary.
Wire fraud is big and bad, and we see attempted wire fraud in our office 3 or 4 times a month. That's how prevalent it is.
I know some of the things that we do to try to prevent that, and some of that is just having that conversation with our clients. But tell us some of the things that people need to look out for and what they can do.
Sure. It is a real concern, and not just in Georgia. The problem is that funds in Georgia for a closing have to be wired, anything over $5,000. There are bad guys out there that are monitoring email traffic between the parties that are involved in the transaction. And they sit and they learn and they wait for the right time to jump in. And they know everything about the transaction. They know the buyer's name, the seller's name, the property address, the realtors. And then when the time comes where they have to talk about how the funds are going to get to closing, they jump in, pretend to be one of the parties, and they give false wiring instructions to an account that they own or they control.
Now, you have heard of some really sad stories.
Oh, we've had them actually in our office. A couple months ago, we had a lady wire $186,000 to a fraudulent account. She got an email, she thought, from her realtor that said, go to the bank Friday for this closing next week. This is the amount you have to send. Here's the wiring instructions. So she went to the bank. She did the wire. She came out of the bank, called the realtor, and said, I'm leaving the bank. And the realtor said, what were you doing at the bank? And she said, I got your email. He said, I didn't send an email. So she turned around, went right back inside. Wire was gone. Yep, gone, and Germany gone. I can't get it back on.
At that point, there's nothing that anybody can do.
Nothing you can do.
Another thing that's a little unique with Georgia is due diligence. And that is something that we've explained to our buyers. That is a period after you're under contract. That is a negotiated time period where you can have all of your inspections done, get any questions that you have answered, and it's also a time period that you can terminate on the contract. Now, I'm sure you've seen some situations where perhaps even some lawsuits or certainly issues have arisen from that.
Yes, definitely. And
or misunderstandings.
Right. The law in Georgia is caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. So the buyer has an obligation to satisfy themselves as to the condition of the property before they close. And here's the thing. The law is that if it's something the buyer could have found themselves upon a reasonable inspection of the property. It doesn't matter what the seller said. The seller could have lied all through the entire disclosure.
Yeah, there's a seller's property disclosure that you're referring to.
Right, where the seller is supposed to disclose what they know about the condition of the property. Even if they lied on every single item in there, if it's something the buyer themselves could have found, it makes no difference. It's the buyer's baby once they close. It's really scary. And the single best thing that you can do in order to prevent that from happening if you're coming to Georgia as a buyer is to make sure that you have experienced, professional, knowledgeable realtors, because they will walk you through that part of the transaction. It's the people that come in that don't have the benefit of having those professionals in their corner that really don't know what to look for. And they don't know how to read an inspection or who to even hire for that.
Well, and one of the mistakes we've seen happen, a lot of people make assumptions. Of course, we know what they say about assumptions.
Yes, we do.
But, if it's not in writing, if it's not in the contract, they can say whatever they want, but if it's not in the contract...
That's right. The contract says all notices, all communication has to be in writing. And do you know what is not considered a writing?
Text messages.
Text messages. That is not considered a writing under Georgia law.
And we all correspond a lot by text messages today.
So,
but an email is, correct?
Email is, but not a text.
Gotta remember that. So what are some other things that, and you see it all.
We do see it all.
You see the good, the bad, and the not so pretty. What are some things that come to mind that if you were advising someone moving to the area, they're going to be purchasing a home, what to kind of look out for, what to be mindful of, and then also to address, do they need to redo their will if they're moving out of state? Some of those types of things.
Great question. Well, the first thing that I would say is we see problems sometimes with people coming from out of state having their money properly sent to the closing table. And what I mean by that is, as I said, the funds have to be wired, but wiring funds is not the same as getting on your phone and doing mobile banking.
Yes.
So we've had situations where people have come. There's one lady in particular came in from Wyoming, and she came to our office early. She told us so that she could arrange her wire, and she took out her phone and started trying to do it. And this little bank in Wyoming required any of their customers that wanted to initiate a wire
Go in person.
to go in person. And that is not unusual, and it's not just small banks. Some big banks do that. So we could not close the deal that day, even though everybody was here, because she had to turn around and fly to Wyoming to sit in the bank, to initiate the wire, to come back. We closed 3 days later.
Not ideal to wait till the day of your closing either to wire the funds.
That's exactly right. And then you brought up a good point about once you are here, what might be a little bit different. And it's good that you mentioned wills and estate planning, because there's no such thing as a will that is valid in every state.
Okay.
I would say
a lot of people think
that, sure. I would say that about half the wills I look at from other states are valid here, the other half are not. And the difference really comes down to the state law requirements about how many witnesses you have to have, does it have to be notarized, what kind of powers can the executor have, things like that.
Okay. Anything else you'd advise that you see are a little different?
The other thing that I would talk about is title insurance.
Okay, yes.
Okay, right, so if
a lot of people want to save that money.
A lot of people want to save that money. Owner's title insurance protects the buyer of the property and their equity now and in the future against anybody coming forward with any type of claim against the title to the property. And it's important to get, it's shown as optional on the closing disclosures from the lenders. I personally would not buy property without it. But here's the thing. In the state of Georgia, particularly, they did a survey a few years ago, and they found that 1 in 3 titles in Georgia have a problem. Some problems are bigger than others, but 1 in 3. And the problem with real estate as opposed to other types of law is there's no statute of limitations. It could be a claim that came up 100 years ago that doesn't come to light until you now own the property.
Oh, wow.
And if you don't have title insurance to cover it, you could lose everything you've invested in that.
But if you have title insurance, it's going to cover anything.
You're good. They're going to pay the attorneys, defend the claim. If they lose, they're going to write you a check.
So that few $1,000s that you have to pay for title insurance is well worth it.
Well worth it. Even if it was a frivolous claim, you'd spend more in the first couple of hours talking to an attorney about the problem than the actual cost of premium.
Thank you so much for meeting with us today. And Eric's firm handles a lot of things besides real estate, but of course we use them a lot for real estate. We're so thankful that our clients are able to come here and be well taken care of. You know, they're in good hands. And so we appreciate your time.
Thank you. And whatever you all do, make sure that you connect with a professional real estate agent that knows exactly what they're doing and knows the market.
Absolutely.
That will save you a lot of heartache in the end.
Like us.
Like the vendors, absolutely.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.